Nobody tells you this about retirement. Having nothing you have to do gets old surprisingly fast. And if you're not careful, your world starts getting smaller right along with your schedule. Here are 7 hobbies that can keep you active, curious, connected, and useful after 60. The first one costs absolutely nothing. Put on your shoes and go for a walk. I know, you've heard that advice 1,000 times. But I'm not talking about walking to hit 10,000 steps. I'm talking about replacing something you lost when you retired without realizing you'd lost it. Think about your old working life for a minute. You had places to go. You walked across parking lots, down hallways, upstairs, maybe across a warehouse, a school, a hospital, or an office. You stopped to talk to people. You saw familiar faces. Someone asked how your weekend was. Someone complained about the coffee. Someone needed something from you. None of that felt important at the time. It was just Tuesday. Then you retired, and almost all of it disappeared at once. Now you can spend an entire morning without leaving the house. Then an entire day. And after a while, staying home gets very easy. That's why I think walking after 60 is about more than exercise. It's a way of staying in the world. There's a man in my neighborhood who walks almost every morning. He's probably in his late 60s. Old baseball cap, beat-up sneakers, nothing fancy, and he isn't moving fast. But he knows everybody. He knows which neighbor just had knee surgery. He knows who got a new dog. He knows where the Cardinals show up every spring. He'll stop and talk to somebody working on an old truck in the driveway. Sometimes he'll stand there for 10 minutes. He's not counting those minutes as exercise. He's living in his neighborhood. There's a difference. And that's the kind of walking I'm talking about. Go somewhere where life is happening. Walk through your neighborhood. Walk through a park. Walk around the lake. If your knees hurt, slow down. If 20 minutes is enough, do 20. Nobody is grading you. And every once in a while, leave the headphones at home. Keep the phone in your pocket. Look around. Really look. You'd be surprised how much you stop noticing when every quiet moment gets filled with a screen. Marcus Aurelius spent a lot of time reminding himself to come back to what was actually in front of him. Not yesterday. Not next month. Not everything that might go wrong. Just what's here. That's useful after 60 because your mind can get pretty good at traveling to places you don't want it to go. The doctor's appointment next Thursday. Whether your retirement savings will be enough. Something your son said on the phone. That strange pain in your shoulder. A mistake you made 15 years ago that your brain has suddenly decided to replay at 11 in the morning. Sitting on the couch doesn't always make those thoughts quieter. Sometimes you need to move. I've had problems that felt enormous sitting at a kitchen table and somehow looked a little smaller after a walk. The problem hadn't changed. I had. So try something tomorrow. Take a 20-minute walk. For the first 10 minutes, don't check anything. No news. No email. No Facebook. Don't even worry about how many steps you're getting. Just walk. Notice who's outside. Notice the weather. Say hello to somebody. Let yourself be part of the world for a little while. Because one of the easiest mistakes to make after retirement is thinking that since you no longer have somewhere you have to go, there's no reason to go anywhere. There is. Your legs need it. Your mind needs it. And sometimes, your life gets bigger simply because you walked out the front door. The next hobby doesn't require you to leave the house at all. In fact, you can do it from your favorite chair. And it can put you in a room with some of the smartest people who ever lived, even if they've been dead for hundreds of years. That's reading. That's reading. And before you tell me you're not much of a reader, hear me out. I'm not asking you to finish 50 books this year. I'm not even asking you to finish one this month. Start with 10 pages. That's it. Because after retirement, one of the easiest things to lose isn't intelligence. It's mental friction. For most of your working life, your brain had problems to solve whether you felt like solving them or not. There were emails to answer, people to deal with, decisions to make, numbers to remember, deadlines, schedules, directions. Things went wrong and somebody expected you to figure them out. Then one day, a lot of that stops. And nobody sends your brain a retirement notice. It still needs something to wrestle with. That's where a good book can help. Not scrolling headlines. Not bouncing between 20 articles. Not watching somebody explain a book you could have read yourself. I mean sitting down with one book long enough for another person's thoughts to interrupt your own. There's something wonderful about that after 60. You have finally lived long enough to argue with the author. At 25, you can read a book about marriage and think you understand it. At 65, you've probably got a few notes. Same with money, friendship, regret, ambition, raising children, losing people, forgiveness, getting older. A book lands differently when you've actually lived through some of the things on the page. And this is one place where the Stoics become surprisingly good company. Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing for an audience. He was trying to straighten out his own thinking. Some days he was frustrated with people. Some days he was tired. Some days he was reminding himself that life was short and he was wasting too much of it being irritated. Sound familiar? You don't have to agree with everything he wrote. That's part of the fun. Read a page. Put the book down. Think about it. Write something in the margin. Say, I don't buy that. A book isn't a sermon. You are allowed to argue back. And don't limit yourself to philosophy. Read history, biographies, mysteries, science, a novel you somehow missed 40 years ago. Read about the town you grew up in. Read about a place you're planning to visit. Go to the library and wander around without knowing what you're looking for. That's something we don't do enough anymore. Not every minute of your life needs an algorithm deciding what comes next. And if it's been years since you really read, don't turn it into homework. 10 pages with your morning coffee. That's enough. The goal isn't to impress anybody with how many books you finished. The goal is to remain interested. Because curiosity is one of those things that doesn't disappear because you're getting older. It disappears when you stop feeding it. And here's something I love about reading after retirement. It gives you somewhere to go on a day when you aren't going anywhere. A rainy Tuesday can put you in ancient Rome, or Normandy, or a little town in Maine, or inside the mind of somebody who lived a life completely different from yours. That's a pretty good deal for the price of a library card. But eventually, you have to put the book down. And the next hobby gets your hands dirty. Literally. Plant something. A tomato. A few herbs. Flowers. I don't care if it's a backyard garden or 3 pots sitting on an apartment balcony. Just grow something that doesn't care about your resume. Gardening has a funny way of putting you back in your place. You can spend 40 years becoming very good at getting things done. You make the call. Fix the problem. Push the deadline. Move the meeting. Get everybody on the same page. Then you plant tomatoes. And the tomatoes couldn't care less how important you used to be. They'll grow when they're ready. Or they won't. You can water them. Give them good soil. Move them into the sun. Pull the weeds. That's your part. Then one night a storm comes through. Or something eats half the leaves. Or you do everything right and that plant still looks like it's trying to die just to annoy you. Welcome to one of the oldest Stoic lessons there is. Do your part. Then stop pretending you control the rest. That's easy to say when you're sitting comfortably talking about philosophy. It's harder when you've spent your whole life believing effort should guarantee an outcome. Retirement has a way of exposing that belief. You took care of yourself and your health still changed. You raised your children the best way you knew how and they still made choices you wouldn't have made. You saved carefully and the market still moved. You planned for a certain kind of retirement and life handed you another one. A garden gives you a small place to practice accepting that. You don't scream at the weather. Well, maybe you do once. Then you go outside and see what survived. You clean things up. You replant what needs replanting. And you keep going. There's something else I like about gardening. Something needs you tomorrow. That sounds small until you've retired. For decades, people needed things from you constantly. Sometimes too constantly. Then the phone stops ringing as much. Your kids don't need rides anymore. Nobody needs that report by Friday. Nobody cares whether you're at your desk by 8. You spent years wishing people would leave you alone. Then they finally do. And sometimes, you miss being needed. A garden won't replace a career. It won't replace family. But those tomatoes need water. The basil needs trimming. The The weeds are definitely not going to pull themselves. You wake up and there's a small job waiting outside. And some mornings, a small job is exactly what you need. There's also something deeply satisfying about eating something you grew yourself. The tomato might be ugly. Actually, homegrown tomatoes are often pretty ugly. But slice one up with a little salt, and suddenly the perfect ones at the grocery store seem suspicious. You made that happen. Not completely. That's the lesson. You participated. You did what was yours. Nature did the rest. Epictetus built much of his philosophy around knowing the difference between what belongs to you and what doesn't. A garden will teach you that without making you read a single page of philosophy. And when gardening teaches you patience with the weather, the next hobby teaches you patience with yourself. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. A journal? At my age? But I'm not asking you to write, "Dear Diary," and you don't need to record what you had for breakfast. This is different. Take a cheap notebook. Put it beside your bed. At the end of the day, answer 3 questions. What did I handle well today? Where did I make things harder than they needed to be? What do I want to do differently tomorrow? That's it. 10 minutes. Maybe 5. Nobody ever has to read it. In fact, that's part of what makes it useful. You don't have to sound wise. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to explain why you snapped at your wife. Or why you spent 3 hours worrying about something you couldn't change. Or why you told yourself you'd go for a walk and somehow ended up watching television all afternoon. It's just you and the truth. Marcus Aurelius did something very similar. The book we now call Meditations wasn't written to make Marcus look intelligent. It was private. He was reminding himself how he wanted to live because, like the rest of us, he kept forgetting. I find that comforting. An emperor needed reminders too. You probably will as well. Retirement makes this practice especially useful because something important disappears when you stop working. For years, somebody was evaluating something. A boss, a customer, a patient, a student, a client, a coworker. Even if you hated the feedback, you were constantly getting signals about how you were doing. Then you retire and nobody gives you a performance review for being a human being. Maybe that's for the best. But it also becomes very easy to drift. 1 month turns into 6. You keep saying you're going to call an old friend. You keep meaning to deal with that paperwork. You keep telling yourself you're going to be more patient with your spouse. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. A notebook has a way of catching that. Not to shame you, just to keep you awake. And please don't turn this into another thing you have to be perfect at. Miss 3 nights? Fine. Open the notebook on the 4th. Write 2 sentences. There are no journal police coming to your house. The point is simply to stay in conversation with yourself. Because getting older doesn't automatically make us wiser. I wish it did. It would save everybody a lot of trouble. Wisdom still requires noticing when we're being stubborn, when we're avoiding something, when we're blaming someone else, when we're wasting a perfectly good day being angry about a bad one that happened 10 years ago. That's what those few minutes at night are for. Not to document your life, to pay attention to how you're living it. And if you've made it this far, tell me something in the comments. Which of these would you actually try? Walking, reading, gardening, or journaling? Just pick one. I'm curious which one fits the life you're living right now. Because the next one is for people who miss something retirement quietly takes away. The satisfaction of looking at the end of a day and saying, I made that. There used to be a lot more making in everyday life. People fixed things, built things, sewed things, painted things, took apart an old radio just to see if they could get it working again. Now, when something breaks, half the time we're told it would be cheaper to replace it. Maybe, but that's not really the point. After retirement, making something with your hands can give you a kind of satisfaction that's surprisingly hard to find anywhere else. Woodworking, pottery, painting, knitting, model building, restoring an old car, leatherwork, fixing clocks, building birdhouses with your grandkids. It doesn't matter. Choose something where your hands have to catch up with your brain, and be prepared to be bad at it. That's important. You spent decades becoming competent. Maybe people came to you because you knew what you were doing. You were the experienced one, the person who had seen this problem before. Then at 65, you pick up a piece of wood and discover you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. That's healthy. There's freedom in being a beginner again. Nobody expects anything from you. You can make the ugliest birdhouse in the state of Ohio and the world will continue spinning. Then you make another one. The cut gets straighter. The joint fits better. You stop using quite so much glue. Eventually, something changes. You're not just killing an afternoon. You're getting better. And getting better at something feels good at any age. I think we underestimate how much retirement can remove that feeling. When you're working, improvement is built into life. You learn the new system, take on a bigger project, figure out a better way to do something. Then you retire and the world seems to say, "Great job. Now relax for the next 25 years. That's a long time to relax. There's nothing wrong with rest. You've earned plenty of it. But human beings aren't furniture. We're not meant to be put somewhere comfortable and left there. Seneca understood that character is built through practice. You don't become patient by agreeing that patience is a nice idea. You become patient when the stain doesn't come out right and you have to sand the whole thing again. You become humble when your first attempt looks terrible. You become disciplined when nobody is paying you and you come back tomorrow anyway. And eventually, you have something you can hold. A bowl, a table, a painting, a repaired watch. Maybe it's imperfect. Probably is. But it's yours. You made it. And sometimes the most meaningful thing you can make after 60 isn't something you keep. It's something your daughter puts in her house. Something your grandson takes with him when he moves away. Something that might still be sitting on somebody's shelf long after you're gone. Which brings us to something even more valuable than leaving behind an object. Leaving behind what you know. This one doesn't even sound like a hobby. Maybe that's why so many people miss it. Teach somebody. Think about what you know today that you didn't know at 25. Not facts. I'm talking about the expensive stuff. The lessons you paid for with mistakes. Maybe you know how to run a business. Fix an engine. Care for a patient. Grow vegetables. Manage money. Hang drywall. Cook for 20 people without losing your mind. Maybe you know what 35 years of marriage actually requires. Maybe you know what divorce teaches you. Maybe you've buried someone you loved and somehow learned how to keep living afterward. You know things. The problem is that retirement often takes that knowledge out of circulation. A man can spend 40 years learning a trade, retire on Friday, and by Monday, nobody is asking him anything. That's crazy when you think about it. All that experience doesn't disappear. It just stops having somewhere to go. So give it somewhere to go. Maybe there's a younger person from your old profession who could use an occasional phone call. Maybe your grandson wants to know how to change his own oil. Let him do it. Don't grab the wrench every time he gets it wrong. That's the hard part. Maybe a local school, church, library, veterans group, community center, or volunteer organization needs someone who knows what you know. You don't have to become somebody's life coach. Please don't. Sometimes mentorship is simply being available. Listening before giving advice. Answering the question they actually asked instead of delivering the speech you've been saving since 1997. And accepting that younger people are still going to do things differently. That's part of it too. Marcus Aurelius wrote that human beings are made to work with one another. Retirement doesn't cancel that. Your role changes. That's all. For most of your adult life, being useful may have meant earning money, raising children, meeting deadlines, fixing emergencies. After 60, usefulness can look quieter. Showing a teenager how to do something with his hands. Helping a young nurse through a difficult first year. Reading with a child who's struggling. Helping someone avoid a mistake you made 30 years ago. Or simply being the older person who doesn't panic when somebody younger thinks their life is falling apart. You've already survived a few things. Sometimes that's what they need from you. Not an answer. Perspective. And something interesting happens when you teach. You realize you still have something to offer. That's important. Because one of the cruelest ideas our culture has absorbed is that usefulness has an expiration date. It doesn't. You may no longer have the title. You may no longer have the office. Your name may have disappeared from the company directory the week after you left. But a title was never the same thing as value. The years gave you something. Pass some of it on. And if there's somebody who helped you when you were younger, you already know how powerful this can be. You probably still remember their name. Maybe you haven't spoken to them in 30 years. But you remember. That's the kind of impact I'm talking about. And now we come to the last hobby. This one matters because everything else on this list becomes harder if you lose the ability to move through your own life. At some point after 60, you have to make peace with a fact nobody particularly enjoys. Your body has changed. Maybe your knees remind you every morning. Maybe getting off the floor isn't quite the casual event it used to be. Maybe you look at a staircase now and actually consider whether you need whatever is upstairs. That's life. But there's a big difference between accepting that your body is aging and surrendering it early. So the seventh hobby is simple. Choose one physical practice you can keep doing. Not for 6 weeks. Not until the New Year's motivation wears off. Something you can imagine still doing years from now. Swimming, strength training, cycling, hiking, yoga, water aerobics, pickleball. Whatever fits your health, your joints, your doctor, and your personality. And yes, if you have health issues or you're starting after a long period of inactivity, talk with a qualified medical professional and choose something appropriate for you. This isn't about proving anything. That's actually the point. At 25, exercise can become a competition with everybody else. How much can you lift? How fast can you run? How do you look? After 60, the question gets better. What do I want to remain able to do? Carry my own groceries? Get out of a chair without help? Play on the floor with a grandchild and get back up again? Walk through an airport? Travel with my spouse? Work in the yard? Live in my own home? Those are pretty good reasons to train. And they have nothing to do with looking 25. One of the most stoic things you can do is deal honestly with the body you have today. Not the body you had in 1987. Not the body you wish you had. This one. Today. Maybe you used to run 5 miles and now you walk 2. Walk the 2. Maybe you once lifted heavy weights and now you're working with lighter ones. Lift them well. Maybe the only place you feel safe exercising is in a pool. Get in the pool. There's no medal for pretending you're younger than you are. And there's no wisdom in using age as an excuse to stop doing what you still can. That's the balance. Acceptance without surrender. The Stoics spent a lot of time thinking about mortality. Not because they were obsessed with death. Because remembering that time is limited makes an ordinary Tuesday matter. At 60, 70, 80, you don't need somebody to explain that time moves quickly. You know, you've watched children become adults. You've watched photographs become old photographs. You've said goodbye to people you thought would always be around. So use the body while you have it. Take care of it without worshiping it. Challenge it without punishing it. And stop comparing it to a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. You aren't trying to win against aging. Nobody wins that game. You're trying to remain capable of participating in your own life. That's a much better goal. And that's really what these 7 hobbies have in common. They're not ways to kill time. You have television for that. They're ways to stay involved in your own life. And stay connected to the world around you. And keep giving your mind somewhere new to go. Grow something. And practice caring without controlling. And stay honest with yourself. Make something. And give yourself permission to become a beginner again. And let what you've learned become useful to somebody else. Move your body. And protect your ability to keep showing up for the life you still have. None of this will make you young again. And I don't think that's the right goal anyway. You've already been young. You did that. You made mistakes. Worked jobs you loved and probably a few you couldn't stand. Raised children. Lost people. Paid bills. Changed your mind about things. Learned lessons the expensive way. You don't need to go backward. You need something worth moving toward. That's the opportunity hidden inside retirement. For most of your life, somebody else owned a large piece of your calendar. Your employer, your customers, your children, your mortgage, your responsibilities. Then one day, a surprising amount of that time comes back to you. And yes, at first, all that empty space can feel strange. But empty doesn't have to mean meaningless. It means unwritten. So don't try to start all 7 hobbies on Monday. That's how people end up buying $600 worth of equipment that sits in the garage by October. Pick one. Just one. Take the walk tomorrow morning. Get a library card. Buy 3 tomato plants. Put a notebook beside your bed. Build the crooked birdhouse. Call the younger person who could use what you know. Sign up for the beginner's swimming class. Do something that puts a little structure back into the week. Then see what happens. Because retirement isn't the end of the useful part of your life. It's the end of one way of being useful. There's a difference. And maybe the question after 60 isn't, what am I supposed to do with all this time? Maybe it's, what do I finally have time to become? If one of these 7 hobbies already changed your retirement, tell us which one in the comments. Someone reading your answer may be sitting in that quiet house right now, wondering what comes next. And if these are the kinds of conversations you want more of, subscribe. We'll keep talking about how Stoic wisdom can help us handle the parts of getting older nobody really prepares us for. Not by pretending age doesn't matter, but by refusing to waste the life that's still here. I'll see you in the next one.